It's time for the Charlotte FC podcast. This is Nick Finelli, host and producer of the Charlotte FC podcast. On this show, we like to learn about what people do in this soccer ecosystem, whether they work behind the scenes at a match or entertain and inform through their coverage on radio, podcasts, and TV. We like to learn how they got there and what it takes to do what they do. I feel like the more you get to know someone, the more you care. So now, I would like to welcome you into my conversation with Andrew Wiebe. Andrew has been a part of Major League Soccer since about 2010, working as an editor, writer, columnist, podcaster, host, and MLS Season Pass TV analyst on Countdown 360 and Wrap Up. He is intensely passionate about soccer and growing the game, and goes all in everything he does. The conversation weaves through his journey from his big chance to move to New York City with MLS, to how he manages all the hats he wears, to his take on soccer in America today, and how he became the unofficial admin of the Patrick Agyemang Hive at MLS. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Andrew Wiebe. First of all, thank you, Andrew, for doing this.
I appreciate your patience with me, Nick, because I think this is, I do a number of shows because I love doing it. I love talking about the game. And I feel like this is deja vu for me right now because I'm often coming off the top being like, I'm so sorry I was so difficult to track down. I have a bad habit of not writing down schedules, of forgetting things. And so I appreciate your patience on this night, Nick, as we're watching the LAFC Vancouver game in the second screen together. So it's a communal experience.
Yes, very fun. All right, so we start every podcast with the guests actually giving a little elevator pitch, introducing themselves, their current roles, their current hats, and then where you call home. So go ahead, man.
I'm Andrew Wiebe. I'm from Wichita, Kansas. I'm a Kansan born and raised. Extremely proud of that fact, despite the fact that I'll never move back to Wichita, Kansas. Knock on wood. I don't think that will happen. But yeah, I got deeply into soccer on a professional level in the aftermath of 2006 in the World Cup. I watched basically every single game there. And I had played soccer till I was about 14 or 15, but was a baseball player ultimately in the end. And I just got obsessed, and I sort of have an obsessive personality. Once I go down a rabbit hole, I oftentimes don't come out of it. And soccer has been sort of the longest, deepest rabbit hole of my life in many ways. I just couldn't stop learning, watching, trying to understand the culture and the people and the players and all the different approaches to this game that, different parts of the world, even different parts of the same countries or cities, etc., have toward soccer. And I was in college at the time that the 06 World Cup went down, and I was a business major, and I said, this is not really working out for me. Accounting 201 was a tough one for me. And so I knew I loved sports. I knew I loved writing. I got into the journalism school in Kansas, which is a really, really prestigious journalism school. And I just remember thinking, okay, well, I'm behind, like everybody else they know this is what they wanted to do. They've been going down the path. And I went to the University of Daily Kansan, and I was into soccer at the time. Like I was spending, 8-hour shifts at the bookstore where I worked packing up orders in the basement, just reading Eurosport and watching highlights on YouTube. And I just went to him. I said, hey, I love MLS. I'd like to write a professional soccer column. And I got very fortunate. The sports editor at the time was a soccer fan. And he said, why the hell not? And he did that. Yeah, and I took a stab. And I think the first column I wrote was a reaction to the 5-4 game at Giants Stadium between the Red Bulls and the Galaxy, the Juan Pablo Angel, David Beckham circus game.
Yeah.
And I just kept going from there, man. And I eventually got a call to go to write for MLSsoccer.com when it rebranded. I was the beat writer, so to speak, that covered the Kansas City Wizards and then Sporting Kansas City. And in 2011, I was invited to move to New York City, and they said, hey, we have a full-time job as an editor for you. I understood that meant I was the very bottom of the totem pole, but I was extremely fortunate to learn from Nick Fershaw and from Greg Lawless and Jonah Friedman and the inimitable Simon Borg and Matt Doyle and so many others. And it's just been a sort of a labor of love for the past 13, 14 years. And, I like to think I was doing good work. I was also in the right place at the right time. There's no doubt about that. And MLS just kept giving me more and different work, and it kept working out. And so now I'm an analyst on Apple TV, and you'll see me on MLS Countdown, on MLS Wrap Up, and I still host Extratime, which is the podcast that I've either been, an analyst on or hosted for, God, I think at this point, I think it's been a decade or so.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
you
I just
produced it too, right?
yeah. So I just kind of live this stuff, man, and instant replay and whatever else they ask me to do. So I'm very, very excited for people to see the feature that I did when I went down to Charlotte recently. I think we'll see it ahead of their first home game, which could come in better circumstances.
After tonight.
But they were very confident, Nick. They were very confident when I talked to them. Hopefully they can turn things around and make this an interesting series and get a win at home.
Might happen. We'll see. You never know. So back to your going to New York City. I read that you once said that New York City made you. Basically, like talking about how you love the city, how you kind of grew up as an adult and as a professional there after kind of leaving college. So what is so special about it for you?
I think, maybe other people have a different experience in life, but I think we're all sort of moving through these different sort of eras within our own lives and different levels of maturation and opportunity. And, I moved to New York City when I was 25, and I just think I was still basically a kid. I really hadn't sort of found myself in a lot of ways. I hadn't found, I don't know how to describe it, like sort of assuredness that I was on the path that I was meant to be on and that I was passionate about. And I think moving to New York, certainly professionally, gave me that. But even more so personally, I just I hit the reset button in a lot of ways. It's not to say that I was a different person, in Kansas City where I moved after college, or in Lawrence when I was in college and then into New York. I just think I better understood the things that made me tick, the things that made me happy, the sort of people that made me happy. And I just really felt like in meeting this large group of friends, both within the soccer world and outside the soccer world, of having all these really formative experiences, whether those are personal or, professional or, romantic relationships or whatever it is. Like, look, let's be candid. I think everybody feels that in those parts of their lives. Like if you are who you are forever at 25, like, I don't know if that's not a good thing, right? Like, and so I found a lot of, I found a lot of connection with people, and I found a lot of interesting viewpoints on life, and it just kind of broadened my horizons past this little Kansan world that I'd lived in for basically 25 years, where I'd been surrounded by my best friends. I've been surrounded by my family. I had a comfortable little cocoon. And I just remember for the first 6 months being in New York City, just being like, oh God, just overwhelmed, I just had to learn so much and get used to so much. And it just sort of changed my attitude toward what I wanted my life to look like. And I want to open it up a lot more. I wanted to experience more things.
Yeah. And I think for anybody, like once you find that fit and you feel it, it's hard not to let go of it. Like you just got to be like, I want this all the time.
Yeah, and I had it all the time. And I'm in a different place in my life now than I was then. Then I was kind of a single man who did whatever the hell I wanted whenever I wanted, and that was beautiful. There was nothing. I'm not complaining about that. I reminisce about that often, but it's not who I am anymore in a lot of ways. But yeah, MLS was sending me around the country 70, 80 days a year to cover soccer. I was living in the greatest city in the world. I was on these awesome men's league teams full of my friends and playing pickup soccer on the weekends and going out 3-4 days a week and just really experiencing life and really learning a lot professionally too. And I still, the way I think about it is like that made me, and I'll carry those hallmarks with me forever. And I met my wife in New York, and now we have this amazing family that is my life. And we moved back to Kansas City, and that was actually wonderful. And now we're in New Jersey, and it's, sort of a different sort of cocoon, and that's really nice too. But I never feel the same way as I do when I'm in the city, when I'm walking down a street in New York City, or I'm getting on the subway, and I'm just feeling this sort of rush of life. Because that's really what it is. It's just like you feel so small, but you feel like the opportunities are so big, and you just have this panorama of people and experiences and food and smells and ideas just flowing around you at all times. And I don't think any place, at least the United States, can replicate that sort of feeling.
Yes, definitely the vibe that I always get going there. What do you ever just like pinch yourself and be like, I can't believe I'm doing this? Like in your world, like every day you get to do these things?
Oh, every day.
That you're doing?
Every day, man. Every day. I pinch myself, and in some ways I pinch myself to remind myself that I can't be comfortable. But it really is a low odds, this should never have happened situation for me in a professional sense. I think about that all the time when I'm, just to get the job, just to get that low level editing job with MLSsoccer.com back in 11. I mean, I remember those days. That was when writing was king, when the internet was a much different place than it is now, when the written word really carried weight, and there were a ton of extremely talented people that I just felt like, man, how could I compete with these people? I'm just trying to fit in a lot of ways, and to be able to have just the flexibility in life to make that move, to have the opportunity and have people think, oh, will you do this, was a blessing, and then to be here is even more so. I mean, I sit on a desk with Sasha and Brad, or I sit on the desk with Lloyd the other day, and I'll be there with Kaylee Carr and all these folks that played the game at such a high level. Or like a Kevin Egan, who's this incredible broadcaster, and probably the most accomplished of all of them is Kaylin Kyle. Just in the game, like what she's done is absurd. And then I'm like, we banter on the shows and stuff, and they're like, yeah, what about you? And I'm like, well, never done that, but here's what I think. So I have to come at my job from a different angle than, hey, I'm a former player who's been there, done that, because I haven't. I'm a person who's obsessive with the league, with the game, who wants to learn as much as I can at all times. And I need to be sort of a person who can connect with fans who are thinking about it in the same way of like, what did I just see? Why did I see that? What's the right question to ask a Brad or a Sasha or a Kaylin in this moment? What's the context behind this signing, or why they didn't make this signing? What's like the nerdy stuff that other people might not put in the time to know, but that I can explain to you in 2 sentences and have you go, oh, got it. Right. Here's the historical context. Here's why that matters. Here's what the coach said last week. Like, I've just got to approach my job in a different way. And, under the table, there's no doubt I'm pinching myself, man. It's a blessing. It's so fun.
With covering so much and watching and being a part of so much without actually playing, are there certain like statistics or things that you watch for, and like these are kind of the things you're like, oh, that stands out to me more, or you bring it up to those people who have played?
Yeah, I think in watching the game for so long, my brain has kind of changed in the way that I watch games. I often watch games at like 2 or 4 times speed when I'm trying to catch up during weeks. And a lot of what I look for now are not necessarily just individual touches and individual skill. It's a lot of like, hey, where's space? Where are they playing? Why are they playing there? What are patterns of play? And try to then dig down deeper from there. A lot of what I'm going to ask the analysts with me who have done it are those technical things. How do you hit a ball like that? Like, because I can see, okay, well, this is what it looks like. This is, that was Ryan Gall just did something very special, folks. Very close, very close. But I can't tell you how to do that. I spend a lot of time talking to coaches, and so I'm often looking for what they're talking about when I watch games. Because for me, that's the prep work that sets me up to try to understand ultimately what they're asking of their teams. It's a much better way, in my opinion, for me to watch than just coming in cold. Like, I want to come in thinking, okay, well, hey, look, Vanni Sartini wants to see this, this, and this. These are the things that he's focusing on. These are the things they're emphasizing this week. Are they doing them? And if not, why not? So a lot of the way that I watch is really informed by coaches and, what they say they're trying to do, both in the public sphere and then behind the scenes. And then just with, like I said, 13 years of watching the game and of watching this league and of watching as many games as I can every season, I just start to get a feel for what teams are doing, why they're doing it, and what they want to do.
Yeah. Now, you talked about earlier about kind of how you got into this, kind of your interest, but do you remember when you were like a young kid and growing up, you have some siblings, I know, that was soccer a big part or just a little part of it? Or, were you influenced by family? Were there other people around? Kind of what were your interests and dreams at that time?
I mean, just sports in general. I was the kid that, like, my dad got Sports Illustrated at his office. When he brought it home, I mean, I was, standing at the front door, like waiting for him to get there every single episode, no doubt about it. So just sports in general, where I grew up, my family's KU Jayhawks fans. So KU basketball, KU football, Chiefs, Royals. But then on the soccer side, I started playing when I was 5 years old, and I remember very vague, like hazy snippets of this YMCA indoor league that I played in downtown Wichita, and they had the foam ball that was like not a real ball, but it was, I don't know, back in those days, they probably still have those. And then I played until I was 14, and I was really into it. I really loved the game. I think I was good, not in like, hey, you're going to go somewhere good, but in a, hey, you can play. Like, you're not a bad player. But I had plantar fasciitis, and baseball and playing catcher sort of took over my life. But I grew up going to professional soccer games, and it wasn't outdoor soccer. We didn't have that in Wichita. I don't know if you can see behind. Well, I guess you can see the Roger Espinoza jersey signed behind me. But on the other side of that one is a 1979-80 Wichita Wings, as they wore on the field, authentic kit signed by the stars of that club. And my aunt and my grandma were season ticket holders from the very first season. And when I started going with them, probably in the early 90s, like that was one of the highlights of my life, was to go to the Kansas Coliseum and sit in their seats. And my grandma always had a purse full of candy. I called her Candy Grandma. And then, if I got some nachos, I was sick. And then always there was a huge line in the basement of the Coliseum where you could go get like the headshot of the night signed by the player.
Right.
And so that's what I grew up on. My aunt and my grandma taking me to Wings games in the cold winter months at the Coliseum, and playing in the spring and the fall, and then playing indoor in the winter. And that's what I did till I was 14, and my heels hurt so bad that I could barely walk. And I was like, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So,
well, I had similar experiences. I grew up in the DC area, so I had the Diplomats for some time, but then we also had the indoor Baltimore Blast.
Oh,
so like that was a big thing. So I remember playing a lot of indoor soccer. So you have these ideas, you're going to college to do business, then you go into writing, and then kind of the soccer thing pulls out. And you said you kind of got this lucky chance to work as an editor for MLS. Like, how did that really happen? What's the story behind that?
I mean, it was basically that. So, like I said, I felt like I was behind in journalism. All the people I was with, are these incredibly accomplished, many of them incredibly accomplished sports journalists, and not just sports, people in other places as well. I mean, I went to college with Rustin Dodd, who's now at The Athletic and has been there for a long time, is one of the better feature writers in the country. And Jason Jinks is sort of in that same boat. And there's a laundry list of other folks I could take you to. So I just felt behind, and I couldn't get an internship. And I went and I just started a blog spot called KC Football. And I just said, you know what? I'm going to go cover the Wizards. I had written a couple feature stories on the Wizards and written some columns on them when I was at the Kansan, and I was just trying to get some clips. I was just like, man, I got to do something, right? And that was a different age of the internet too.
Yeah.
I had gotten on.
That was the beginning of the creation. Like everybody can be creators now, but back then, not many people were creating much.
No, and those that people could really build a following with the written word. Do you remember Do Nord, the blog spot? Yeah. So I obsessively read Do Nord, as I think most of us did in those days, because that's where you could really aggregate all the coverage, not just of MLS but of international soccer. And I remember the first day I went to Do Nord, and I scrolled down and I was clicking links and reading links, and I saw Andrew Wiebe of the University of Daily Kansan writes about like the number 10s in MLS who are making an impact from South America, and my jaw just dropped. That was one of the moments in my life that really, I was just like, oh, I guess I can do this in some way. Like, I don't know what way it is. And so I did the blog, and I made really good connections with the PR staff in Kansas City. And then when they restarted MLSsoccer.com, they went from MLSnet to MLSsoccer.com and just completely rebranded, reimagined the website ahead of the 2010 season, I believe it was. The editor, Jonah Friedman, he was the managing editor, reached out to the folks at the PR staff in Kansas City and said, who would be a good writer for us? And they said, well, you should try this guy. So I have Kyle Rogers to thank for that reference, and probably Rob Thompson as well. And then, they hit me up and they said, basically, like, do you want to do this for, I think at the time I probably made 12 to 15 grand a year, but for a 23-year-old in Kansas City, that was pretty good. I went to Europe for a month and backpacked on that money and did a bunch of cool stuff and felt like, okay, well, maybe I'm doing something here while I worked full time as a like IT and like a, I don't know, kind of like a product analyst for a big almost semi-government agency related to insurance. That was just my day job. And then at the end of that second year, I had done a bunch of work. They had rebranded to Sporting Kansas City, which gave me a bunch of opportunities to write really interesting stories. And Manchester United had come. And, I was young and single, I think, and probably also cheap. So if you were looking for somebody to pick up and move to New York City, I was a pretty good candidate for that. And Greg Lawless called me one day and said, hey, well, we have this spot open. Would you like to move to New York City and be a new media editor for MLSsoccer.com? And I remember thinking for about 10 minutes, like, do I want to move to New York City? My younger brother was playing college soccer in Kansas City, and he had just moved like a year past, and it was really nice to be close to him. We're 6 years apart, so we'd kind of been apart for a long time. And I thought, oh, man, do I really want to leave? Had a great apartment, a bunch of good friends, obviously. And my friend said, are you an idiot? Like, what are you even thinking about this for? Like, you got to go. You have to go. And so I went.
You never get that opportunity again, right?
No, pull the trigger, man. You can always move back.
Yeah. So you did that. So in this world, not only did that expand into having your own podcast, and I don't know if that was your idea or MLS's or just kind of a combination of meeting of minds.
Extratime is a 2010 World Cup creation when they rebranded the site. So Extratime was a daily podcast covering that World Cup in 2010, and it was Greg Lawless and Jason Seguini and Nick Fershaw and Simon Borg, and I was an addicted listener. Like, I was at my desk at my day job listening to the entire catalog of this show, of old shows. Like, I just completely, I just hoovered it up. And so when I moved to New York City, it was like kind of an awe thing, because these were my guys. Like, this is who I listened to. This is where I got my opinions on the league. And I remember getting there and just being like, oh, wow, like, this is amazing. Simon Borg is like mentoring me. Like, Greg Lawless is my boss, and Nick Fershaw is like maybe the best editor I've ever been around. He's really changing how I think about editing and about producing features and daily coverage and fill in the blank. And then, boy, I'm trying to think of exactly. So Nick moved to LA, and it was Simon, and he was like, hey, do you want to be on the show? Actually, it was Nick. No, I think Greg didn't have time, or something happened. They needed a co-host to move in, and I got a couple cameo experiences on it, and it was like, man, wow, I get to do this with these guys. Like, this is my show. And then Nick moved to LA, and Simon was like, I think you should host it. And then it's just been sort of a revolving cast since then of all these different amazing people and personalities that have come through the show and made it what it is. And I've managed to hang on. I truly love it. I truly love it. It is the most pure part of my work week. It has always just been friends talking about the things that friends talk about. It's an extension of our group chat. It's still really fun. You
would have been doing anyway. 100%. But now you get to do it in front of
and I'm still doing it. I mean, the group chat is exploding right now. Like when these games go, the group chat is just absolutely firing on all cylinders.
So you get to interview a lot of people. Is there anything you do to prepare, and like, how have you improved?
I do a ton of prep. I read as much as I can. I watch as much as I can. I try to look for things that I think have a long tail. Like, I don't want to ask questions that are going to be closed off. I want that to be the beginning of something. And then where I think I've really improved over the years is going from a young kid that was a little bit nervous and wanted to be perfect in how I asked questions and how I approach things, and just getting to a point of thinking about everything as a conversation. And really the most important thing you can do is to make the other person comfortable. If the other person is comfortable, you can go a lot of different places. If they're not, you really are limited in where you can go. And so I will credit, many, many years of being a print journalist, basically, with really helping me figure out that sort of side of things. And then I just also developed sort of a side where I was like, I'm really not afraid to ask anything. Like, I'm not trying to play gotcha with you. I'm just, this is the question. This is what everybody's wondering, or this is what I in particular am wondering. I'm going to ask you. I'm not going to do it in an aggressive way. I'm going to do it in what I hope is an empathetic way. Right. But I think the business that we're in, like, we're not talking to a man on the street. I think it's fair to ask professional athletes, and entertainers about their profession and what they do, how they do it, and why they do it, and sometimes how their
Right.
personal life bleeds into that. And so I try to come at it from like, I'm not playing got you. This is a human thing. And on the flip side, I'm always down to hear from people. If you feel like I did something that you didn't like, if you feel like I said something you didn't like I'm not going to be confrontational about it. I'm here to have a conversation. So yeah, I definitely think I've gotten better over the years. I think a lot of it's just practice and doing it.
Yeah, I agree. You just got to put yourself out there sometimes. Now, you said in another interview I read about you that one of your proudest moments as a journalist was when you got 7 or so MLS players to come on and talk about racism in sports and their lives on Extratime.
Yeah.
And just sharing like anxieties and fears and hopes. Why was that so important, and how do you capture something like that again?
Boy, that was a unique moment. That was during MLS is back and during COVID and during the George Floyd movement and aftermath, obviously. And there were a lot of conversations happening, and a lot of I think trauma for people, both in relation to George Floyd and really coming to terms with racism and the after effects in the country, and then also just in terms of COVID and the effect that had on people's lifestyles and on lives, not just lifestyles. Like, people were losing their lives. People were scared. We were all sort of tucked away from each other. And I think that's a really difficult thing for people. And then not only that, you have this violence that we can all see in front of our own eyes, and then the aftermath that comes with that, of course. So I'm extremely proud of that because, I think it would be easy for league podcasts to always just be a really sort of like, hey, what's that shiny thing, soccer based thing? And we always have taken pride on Extratime of acknowledging a wider world, both for ourselves, but also for our listeners, and obviously for our players and the managers and everybody who makes up the league. And so in that moment, to have a bunch of guys from different backgrounds feel like Extratime was a place where they could be honest and truthful and say some things that in the aftermath of striking and not having games that might not be things that everybody would love, and feel comfortable doing that. Yeah, that really to me was like that's what we're going for, like we're not trying to be a place where you feel like you can't be yourself. We're not trying to be a place where you feel like there are artificial limits on what you can say, who you can be, and what parts of you that you can share. Like, that was really impactful to me to have those conversations, obviously, and then to be able to do it in a public sphere and to be able to, hopefully give our listeners an idea after the players had said, hey, we're not going to play these games, and done so in solidarity with some of the other leagues around the U.S. And I just felt like there are limited moments in life where you have that opportunity to sort of stick your neck out. And first and foremost for the players for doing what they did. And then I think for us to just say, hey, we want to be a part of that, and have them say, I think that we feel comfortable with that. That was really powerful for me to experience, and I was just so proud of honestly the entire group of players in MLS around that time for not being NBA players who have a little bit less to lose in terms of financial wherewithal, and saying, hey, we have something to say here. Let us say it, and we hope that people hear us.
Cool. Speaking of just the impact of players and just the game in the U.S., I'm sure you're just ecstatic that it's grown so much and you've been a part of that. You also talked about just community being what is really sustaining the league, and you think about all the supporters groups and the core part of how life is around this MLS for them leading into this World Cup and with MLS and some. Do you feel like you're really hitting the stride, especially knowing what's about to come up with all the growth of soccer in front of us?
I mean, I think we're definitely hitting a different level than I have ever imagined that the league could hit, honestly. Like every year, every moment, I'm just sort of in awe because I have these memories of the past. And when you put the memories and the reality of the present side by side, it's just so striking. Are we where we want to be? Do we have the right amount of momentum? I don't think I can answer that question except to say that, like, you always want more. You always want more. Like, I'm greedy like that. And maybe it's because I want this community to be big and vibrant and to have this even larger sort of paddock of people and cultures and feelings and fan styles and everything else fit into it. So I think my answer to that would be is like I don't think we're where we want to be yet, right? Like until you get there, you're not there. And our attitude as soccer fans in this country, and then obviously on the more of the business side for the league and other folks to answer that I'm admittedly not as worried about. I'm more worried about trying to grow the number of people that care about it and really serve the people that are in the tent right now. We always want more. We always have to want more. If we're not trying to be bigger than we are now, I feel like we've lost sight of really where we're going.
And the bar's always going to move.
Oh yeah, always.
So, thinking about your whole career you've had so far and what's going on right now for you, what has been the most challenging thing for you in the position you're in now? Because you wear lots of hats. You write, you produce, you host, you're on multiple shows.
Most challenging thing. I think it is probably just changing the hats because each thing demands something so different from me. One of my biggest, the first thing that jumped to my head, Nick, was like basically coming in last year into the studio environment and having to sort of learn how to be an analyst in a lot of ways. And I don't mean that in the sense of like learning how to watch the game and I mean it in terms of there's just a different demand on you as an analyst in a studio setting than there is on a podcast. Like right now I can ramble, I can, something can pop into my head and it's natural. That's the way a conversation works, right? Like I can pull something out and be like, tight. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. And then it turns into something great. And it's like, well, that's a great podcast because it, and you don't need to be, hey, 20 seconds is what you got. If you don't say what you want to in 20 seconds and in the way you want to, that opportunity is gone and it's never coming back. And so learning how to, one, formulate thought in that way of like, okay, if I have to be there in 20 seconds, how do I edit? And this goes back to the different hats. So I'm always using the different hats in different ways. I'm basically editing myself. I have all these things to say. Like I got reams of stuff to say. Like there's no shortage of things that I want to say. How do I then go in and decide the 3 things that I can say in that amount of time coherently? And then it's the writer. How do I say it coherently? How do I say it in a way that's convincing or fits the moment? And then there's also the podcaster that comes there of like reading people, of understanding how the conversation's going, of being able to extemporaneously just say it. And all those things I feel like come together and that is all the hats working as one. But man, it is much harder than it looks to get in a studio, have the lights on, have the thing moving fast and be like, yo, this is you. Like, don't fumble. Don't fumble.
Right. And like you said, reading the room, you got to know, like, am I going to say something that I know, like Bradley's going to pick up and say anyway? Yep. So should I have my different perspective?
Yep.
Because I know he's going to answer that way. And then you basically have the same view, which is not good.
No, and that's where figuring out what your lane is, right? Like I've really this year in particular said to myself, like, my lane is to be, I think of it almost as a columnist. I'm here to help educate people on the league, on the players, the manager, the history, what people are saying, both in public and behind the scenes. I'm here to help translate this big jumble of stories to you and say, these are the ones that matter. These are why they matter. This is the context behind it. And then to sprinkle in, if I have tactical stuff or if I have, individual player stuff, to sprinkle that in. And then to really try to set up Brad and Sasha and Kaylin to shine in their own way. Like that's part of going back to the hats conversation is like, I am an analyst now, but I was a host. And I really thought of myself as a host. And I thought that's what I was going to be doing if I was doing anything on Season Pass. And I'm actually really thankful that it's gone the way it's gone because I feel really comfortable now as an analyst and I still get to wear the hat. I still get to wear the hat when I host Extratime. I hosted the Super Draft last year, which to me is the hardest show in the whole league to host. So I'm still using those muscles and now I'm just developing others as well.
It makes total sense now that you're kind of the champion or the leader for the affinity for Patrick Agyemang, as the Crown fans call you, the admin of the Agyemang Hive at MLS, because you seem to have gotten people on that bandwagon. Where did that come from?
Well, that's a funny story. It actually came from the Super Draft. And when I prep for the Super Draft, one of the most difficult things is just making sure that I know how to pronounce every single player's name exactly how they would pronounce it. I think it's incredibly important among the many jobs that you have as a host on that day. You got to know all 29, soon to be 30 teams. You've really got to be able to keep the show flowing and dish it to all your, put people in good positions, etc. But when that pick comes in, and that kid and his family and his coach and his friends and his teammates and everybody who's played a part in that career up until that point are watching and waiting, I don't want the moment that they hear their name called for them to be like, wait, what? Who
is this?
That's not me. I grew up with a name that was mispronounced at every single turn. I grew up getting phone calls from telemarketers and knowing immediately if I could hang up the phone because it would be Wiebe or Webb or whatever it was. And so I could not find a good pronunciation for Patrick Agyemang. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I had the pronunciation for the player who played in the Premier League. And I thought, well, that's probably it. But you just don't know in some of these things. I found his Instagram and I DM'd him. And I said, hey, Pat, I need your help, man. Do you pronounce your name like the Premier League player? And he said, actually, I don't. And I had him send me a voice memo of him pronouncing his own name. And I just said, hey, man, thank you so much. Good luck. And he was drafted a little bit earlier than a lot of people thought he might be. And I just texted him and I said, congratulations, make the most of it. And it's little things like that. I've always been somebody, just based on who I am, when I started covering the league, et cetera, that really enjoyed the Super Draft, always rooted for college players to do well. Came up in an era of MLS where there were a lot of really great players in the league, both American and otherwise, that came from the college system. And I just thought, I hope Pat succeeds. He just had a great big old smile and he looked happy and and then all of a sudden he's scoring goals for Crown Legacy, and now he's scoring some straight up bangers for Charlotte, and he's a player that's going to be around, if not in MLS, as a pro for a long time. And when I say if not in MLS, I don't mean like drop. I mean like, is some championship team going to come by him? Is some Belgian team going to come by him? Is he going to hit that trajectory? Because I think he has all the talent in the world, and he's just starting to scratch it.
Nice. We end our show typically with a quick personal hitter type questions.
Oh yeah.
It's stoppage time.
Do you have any walk-up music?
Oh man, walk-up music. Back in the day for baseball, what would I have probably played back in those days?
Or even now. I mean, you walk in the room into the studio. What are they saying about Andrew?
Well, back in the day in high school, because I know what my walk-up music was, it was Linkin Park. That was a different time. Really, that was the golden era of Linkin Park. So that was good hype music back in those days. Walk in the studio, I would probably say some Kevin Gates. That might be a very obscure reference, but Kevin Gates would be my answer to that. He's a rapper out of Indianapolis, I believe. I just enjoy the Kevin Gates vibes. So I don't know. We might go with I Don't Get Tired, or Really Really, or Big Gangsta. One of those is probably.
But it just pumps you up.
Yeah. It's just you have to have that. You have to have that mentality when you come in. It's going to be late at night. You've been grinding. I've got a whole life that I'm living outside of soccer that is demanding with two small boys. And when you come in, you got to get up. It's time to get up.
Yeah. Do you have a must-do personal ritual?
Must-do personal ritual around work? Not.
Yeah.
Around work, no.
Mm-hmm.
Not really. At home, yeah. At home, yeah. I mean, I sing the same 3 songs to my sons every single night before bed, and they demand that. So we have the ABCs, which somehow stuck after all these years. They still ask for it at 4 and 6. A Baba Black Sheep, which again has stuck, and then I don't know if you've ever seen the book that's I think it's called "I'll Love You Forever." It's like one of the saddest books any parent can read. It's so emotional, but I basically tweaked that song to fit them, and so that's their what they call the tuck-in song. So that would be the one thing every single day in my life I do, no matter what.
Oh man, that's awesome. I remember when my kids didn't want me to read to them anymore. It's kind of weird.
I don't even want to imagine it yet.
You don't want to think about it yet.
No, not yet. Not yet. We're still getting 3 or 4 books and asking for more every single night. So we'll go until we can't.
All right. Do you have a favorite unplugged activity?
Right now, fishing.
Ooh, cool.
Right now, fishing. It was golf during the pandemic, and I was a big fisherman as a kid for 3 or 4 years. Went out from like probably 3rd to 6th grade-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And I went out with my sons to go meet another family here in town. There's a little pond, and they were fishing, and we were just hanging out and caught a couple fish, and I was like, oh, I'm back. So I went from 0 gear maybe 5 months ago to I have 4 or 5 different setups in the garage. I got
You go all in. Like once you get into something, it sounds like you just go all in.
Yeah, that's definitely my personality in a nutshell. Like I'm going down the hole. That goes for fishing, which I'm voracious. I'm just reading as much as I can, learning as much as I can all the time, then going out and trying to implement it. It was the same thing for golf. It's the same thing like intellectually with books and learning. Like I'm big into, there'll be topics where I say everything I need to know about that. So like probably for the last 5 years, it's been the Balkans. So like Balkan history,
nice.
like way back through the Ottoman era into sort of modern reconstruction, and then of course, sadly, all the conflict since then. But when I find something, man, I'm gonna go as deep as I can.
Sweet. Do you have a go-to snack or food while you watch a match?
Well, we get to order something late night. And so my go-to this year has been a Cobb salad from an unnamed deli. I don't even know the name of the deli in New York City, but my God, that Cobb salad hits the spot, huh? It is so good. It is so good. I basically get it every single match day, and so probably from around like 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. I'm hitting that Cobb salad.
Nice. What design impresses you more, interior or exterior? Or what part of design?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think I would actually say, exterior. Just it impresses me more because I think it's so much more difficult to change. It's sort of immovable in a lot of ways. Like you can change it, but you're asking for more to be done, whether it's structural or whatever else, in changing it. So I think a big goal for LAFC.
Yeah,
it's tough. Vancouver missed some chances early on. So I think that, but I also would say landscape. I'm really at a place in my life where I like to be outside, thus fishing. I think that's a big part of it for me, is that it's quiet. My phone's not around. It's sort of zen in a way. It's a repetitive action, and you really have to be in tune to every little feel to be successful. And so I think that's why I like it. And so I would also just say, I'm really into that side of it. My dad became a big gardener later in life, as my grandma was before him, and I had my hand at that in Kansas City when we had our house there, and I'm sure one day I'll be back to it.
Nice, yeah. And I was reminded of like fishing. It's kind of like, in some ways, like golf. It's like you get that one nice sweet shot, and you're back again. You catch the fish that you were trying to catch all day, and that just gets you back again.
100%. There's a payoff there, but there's also that, I don't know, there's also that 4 hours where you were struggling against it too that has value. So yeah, it's been great.
Oh, yeah.
My kids can take about 10 minutes. So I end up going with them, but often by myself, so I can get the full experience.
Well, you also get some good kind of zen time, like you said. Do you find starting a project or finishing one more gratifying?
Ooh, this is an interesting question. My wife just had me take 16 personalities the other day. And so I think probably starting it. I think that's me. I'm more of a starter oftentimes than I am a finisher. There's a lot of different things going through my mind in any given 1 second. So probably starting. I have a lot of momentum early with projects and ideas, and the real challenge for me is keeping that momentum. So I would say I'm a starter.
Does that also mean, because I'm a starter too, and it's like I'm a vision type thinker rather than kind of the completion. So I like thinking about what could happen.
Yeah.
And then letting everybody else kind of roll in the pieces once I've set it up.
Yeah, I mean, I start with the big idea, and then I'm trying to put the spokes on the wagon wheel from there. And there are a lot of things that works with, and some things it doesn't. My wife would say that we complement each other very well, because she very much she's keeping the wagon running while I'm imagining where we could go with it.
Right. Are you rose-colored glasses type guy?
100%. 100%. I'm a very try to be optimistic, positive person. There are parts of life that will really challenge you on that front. Really challenge you. But I just find that for me, I'm always thinking about trying to think about and focus on what's good and how I can be a contributor to that. So, yeah.
Nice. All right. Last question. What position would you most like to play if you were out on the pitch in today's MLS? And what player would you most be like as far as like their demeanor?
Oh, that's interesting. So center back is a given for me on this question. I didn't play any sort of high level soccer in my life. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat that. But when I played as a kid, I was more of an attacker. But when I got into men's league in New York City, because I'm 6'2" and I'm good at winning headers, I became a center back pretty darn quickly. So I'd be center back. As far as somebody's demeanor that I would play like, trying to think of different demeanors around the league.
It's tough when you know so many players.
Yeah, I think I don't think I have one player that I can just.
You could be a hybrid of players.
I think I'm a communicator, so I talk a lot. I'm definitely more on the aggressive side on the field, and then probably somebody that doesn't have great feet. If we're being real, like that's wasn't exactly my strength. So if we can find an amalgamation of that and piece together that Frankenstein, that's going to be. That's going to be me. Very competitive, but not always able to physically do the things that my brain tells me I should be able to do.
Awesome. Well, Andrew Wiebe, thank you for coming on the Charlotte FC podcast and this conversation. I enjoyed it thoroughly and appreciate all your work at MLS and hopefully just more bigger things to come.
I thank you, Nick. I really had fun with he took this places where nobody would expect, and I think that's a good thing. So not just for people listening, I hope, but certainly for me, it was fun to just have a different way to think about my career, and then also about life. I'm gonna have to mull over that interior exterior a little bit with my wife as she thinks about what houses she wants to send me on Zillow.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I use that question just because it's basically like a question about: do you find the things in the details, and are the details the stuff that nobody sees, or the details are the things that everybody sees right away and then just assumes or understands something? It's almost like if you're good at presenting and you have a good presentation and a good slideshow, you can muffle up a lot of things because they see the shiny, pretty 100%. Thing, and they don't even listen to your details because you've presented in such a way that they're already sold.
Yep. I can see that.
So it's interesting. All right, man. Take care. Enjoy the rest of the night.
Appreciate you, Nick. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you again for listening to our conversation. I too am pinching myself each day as I get the privilege to talk one-on-one with people like Andrew and learn more about them as people beyond what we see and hear. I feel like Andrew's can-do, relentless attitude toward learning and getting better is special. Not only does he love the game, but in some ways, he is an ambassador that has used the platforms he has available extremely well to relate and be a part of the fandom of MLS and soccer in America. He makes us all feel comfortable to talk soccer and share. Again, thanks for listening to another episode of the Charlotte FC podcast, where we bring you the fascinating people who work for and around Charlotte FC and the world of football. The Charlotte FC podcast is edited and produced by me, Nick Finelli, and Eli Finelli. Please help us out and share this episode with others. 5 stars, and follow CLTFC Podcast on Instagram, X, and YouTube. Until next time, enjoy the day.